Hi, boys and girls. I'm going to continue to read Chocolate Fever. Today is chapter 11 and 12. Chapter 11 is called At Sugar Cane's. His name was Alfred Kane, but his friends called him Sugar. Sugar Kane was the owner of the largest candy distributing company in the East. Chances are, if you've ever bought a candy bar east of the Ohio River, it came from Alfred Kane's warehouse. And it was a very large business. But Sugar Kane was still interested in everyone that worked for him. So when he saw Mac's big truck pulling into the warehouse, Mr. Kane was very much relieved. So was Mac, and so was Henry. They had made that phone call to Henry's mom, you see, and it was a happy, tearful conversation. And as soon as Mac dropped off all of his candy, he was going to take Henry right home. Henry liked Mr. Kane the minute he saw him. There was something about the twinkle in his eyes, and that made him seem extra friendly. And with his gray hair and mustache, Mr. Kane looked a little bit like Santa Claus. Henry liked Mr. Kane's office too. It was warm and cozy, and the walls were lined with shelves containing every single product the big warehouse had made. Imagine seeing every kind of candy bar, every kind of cookie, every kind of cake, all in one place. It made you hungry to even be there. When they had seated themselves, they talked about their adventure, laughing a little bit. And Mr. Kane looked forward in his chair, and then he took a long look at Henry. He said, "Henry Green, if it won't offend you, I'd like to ask you something about those big brown spots that you have all over." It seemed to Henry that he had explained this story 1,000,000 times, but he went through it again from the beginning to the end. Mr. Kane was listening closely and paying attention to every word that Henry said. When Henry finished, Mr. Kane said, "And you say that this Dr. Fargo of yours called it chocolate fever, eh? I find that terribly interesting." And Henry said, "I find it just plain terrible. Big, brown, ugly spots, looking like a freak. People are staring at me, and all because of chocolate." "All because of chocolate," said Mr. Kane. He shook his head once or twice, and a strange look came over his face. There was a long silence when Alfred Kane spoke again. He said, "Henry Green, let me tell you a story. It's about a boy I once knew, a boy just like you. Oh, this boy loved chocolate too, like you once did. Chocolate in the morning? Yes. Morning, noon, and night, he ate this magical stuff. And if you think you have invented new ways of chocolateness, so did this boy. Chocolate-covered fried chicken, chocolate French toast with chocolate syrup. There was no end to the ways of chocolate with this boy that I'm speaking of. And like you, a strange thing happened to him. In fact, the very same thing." "You mean," said Henry. "Yes," said the old man, "big brown spots all over." "Chocolate fever," Henry said. "The very same." Henry could hardly believe it. "But how did he get cured, you mean?" asked Sugar Kane. "Well, the cure was in 2 parts, and the first was the most important. You see, this boy I once knew had to learn a very sad lesson, which all young people must do. Although life is grand and pleasure is everywhere, we can't have everything we want every time we want it. It's a hard lesson, but you have to understand, we can't have everything we want every time we want it." "Yes," said Henry, "I think I understand. Maybe I have had too much of a good thing." "Indeed." "I'll eat less chocolate then, only when I really, really want to," said Henry. "Well, very good, said Mr. Kane. That's half the battle. And what's the second half of the lesson? Asked Henry. Alfred Kane smiled. It's very simple when you think about it. What is the exact opposite of chocolate? What is the one flavor that is the reverse of chocolate? We all know it and we all love it. Henry said, vanilla? Mr. Kane slowly walked over to his desk, opened a drawer, and brought out a small white box. He said, vanilla pills, Henry Green. The very thing that will cure your chocolate fever within the hour. That's it. If you have truly learned your lesson, then this will cure you. They're called vanilla pills. Henry could hardly speak. He wanted to laugh. He was so happy. He wanted to cry. He was so sad. But all he could do was nod. Wahoo! Said Mac. Vanilla pills. Who would have thought it? There's one more thing, Mr. Kane said. That young man I spoke about, you know, the one that reminded me of you? Yes, said Henry. When he grew up, he decided to spend his life bringing joy and happiness to others. And the way he did it, you see, was to bring chocolate into the world, to make sure that when anyone wanted pleasure, there would be some chocolate anywhere that they went. Henry thought he knew who that other boy was. His name? Mr. Kane said, his name was Alfred Kane, but his friends call him Sugar. Mr. Kane stepped forward and shook Henry's hand. Now you run along with Mac, and if you take those pills on the way, I guarantee that your chocolate fever will be gone by the time you get home. Goodbye now, and remember what I said. Oh, Henry said, goodbye, Mr. Kane. He said, hey, you can call me Sugar, and you can call me Henry. That's the end of chapter 11. Our last chapter, chapter 12, is called The Lesson Learned. Hey, sleepyhead, said Mrs. Green, shaking Henry's shoulder ever so gently. Are you going to sleep forever? Henry stretched and yawned, smiling up at his mother. It was so good to be back in his own bed, right where he belonged. It was Sunday in the Green household. In fact, it was Sunday all over the world. And in the dining room, all the Greens were having a late and lazy breakfast. If you can shake a leg a little, Mrs. Green went on, I think we might manage to have some pancakes ready for you, just the way you like them. Henry hopped out of bed. He felt wonderful this morning, the way he always used to feel. He brushed his teeth carefully and paused on his way to the breakfast table, only to make a few ugly faces at himself in the mirror. With all of those big brown spots gone, forever he hoped, he didn't look half bad. There was a big greeting for Henry when he sat down at the table. Elizabeth, who was wearing her special blue gown, even gave him a kiss. And Mark stopped eating long enough to stick out his hand and ruffle through Henry's hair. There's a lot of news for you today, Henry, Daddy Green said. The company that makes all those candy bars sent me a letter. They want to give you some kind of award for helping hijack and taking care of those thieves. Really, Dad, said Elizabeth. That's super. Yes, indeed, Henry's dad went on. It surely is. And Mac just called a few minutes ago. Wanted to know if we could go over to his house tomorrow and have dinner with his family. Could we, Dad? Asked Henry. That'd be great. Right, son, we certainly can. And Nurse Molly is dropping by this afternoon just to say hello. And there's even more good news. Oh, my goodness, said Mrs. Green on her way to the table with Henry's pancakes. Everything seems to happen at once to our Henry. Dr. Fargo wants to see you after school on Monday. Oh, do I have to? Yes, you have to, said Daddy Green. Okay, said Henry, although he didn't really want to go. He's "He's a good doctor, dear," Henry's mother said. "And if you like, I'll go with you." Then she said, "Now here's your pancakes. And for a special treat just this once, I have your favorite chocolate syrup." Henry's face lit up. His hand shot out and he took a hold of the syrup. But just as he was about to pour the sweet brown mixture over his pancakes, he changed his mind. He said, "You know what, Mom? Just this once, I think I'll skip it. Plain old maple syrup sounds great." The family stared at Henry. It was the first time they had ever seen Henry turn away from anything that had to do with chocolate. His father's smile was as wide as a river. "Enid," he said, "I think our little one is growing up fast." Henry was into his pancakes now, and they were quickly disappearing. The syrup was good and mapley. The pancakes had a delicious flavor and washed down with cold milk. Oh, it was extra good. But still something was missing. Some taste was missing. Some kind of spark that would make it taste even better. There was a small can of cinnamon on the table, which Elizabeth sometimes used on her toast. Henry wondered how cinnamon would taste on what was left of his pancakes. He reached out for the cinnamon and sprinkled just a little bit on his plate. Then he tasted it. Henry thought, "That's pretty good. In fact, it's very good. I wonder how cinnamon would taste on cereal. Ooh, like oatmeal or cream of wheat. And maybe cinnamon would be good on other things. Ice cream or French fries or maybe even cinnamon milk." And then Henry still had another thought. Could you ever have too much cinnamon? Could a person overdo it and there was such a thing as cinnamon fever? Could there be? What do you think? And that's the end of Chocolate Fever. I hope you enjoyed this story.